Good morning to our guests and also our colleagues. This morning, we did ring the bells at 10 a.m. this morning, and colleagues, roll call is open. While roll call is open, I would like to call upon Chair Kwado Shadeja Shandin Parish to do two recognitions this morning. And if Honorable Parish could meet us down here at the presenters table.
Good morning, colleagues. It's been a good morning to everyone in the council chambers here, getting ready for our day 2 of the Navajo Nation Council session for fall 2024. We are very blessed to have many of our colleagues join us this morning in a prayer that is going to help ground us for today's day 2. So we're just finishing that up. But in the meantime, while everyone's still getting settled in, Controller Sean McCabe and I would like to recognize a longtime partner to the Navajo Nation as he has retired and completed his duties with the Navajo Nation. So I'll give some time over to Controller McCabe to give some background and history, and we can begin with that. Thank you. We have Controller Sean McCabe.
By way of introduction again, for the record, Shia Sean McCabe, Yanishia, Ashaini Ashnishle, Touchitni Basishchin. And just thank you, Shinadai, first off for the prayer offered in the side room. Really refreshing to get some medicine this morning. So yeah, for that. Shinadai, I just want to take a little bit of time this morning to recognize an individual who has been the Navajo Nation auditor for, it's been 30 some years now. And being a former auditor myself, I know how hard that job can be, especially of an entity this size. We got word after this year's audit was completed that he was going to be retiring. So we just wanted to take a moment on behalf of the Office of the Controller and the Budget and Finance Committee to recognize a man. And I got my whole team here sitting here to help out. But Mr. John Kennedy is in the audience, and we'd just like to call him up for a recognition by this council for all of his service to the Navajo Nation.
Thank you, Controller McCabe. We'll welcome up Mr. John Kennedy. John Kennedy has served with many of our leaders across the Navajo Nation for various number of years and has really imparted a lot of information to those leaders and to many of my colleagues here on the 25th Navajo Nation Council. So in honor of his partnership with the Navajo Nation, we have a few items, a plaque or a certificate to present to Mr. John Kennedy for his service to the Navajo Nation, and to recognize him on this second day of the 2024 Navajo Nation Council session. So we do have Mr. John Kennedy. Thank you for your service.
I appreciate it. Thank you so very much. I'm just sorry. I'm so honored, and gosh, I'd be honest, probably tear up a little bit. So blessed to have been able to work with the nation for so many years. It's been a wonderful, wonderful experience, and professionally, but as I tell people all the time, personally, it's been also just wonderful to get to meet everybody, to learn so much, and appreciate what the Navajo Nation has and offers to so many. And so I just looked for all the opportunities I could to work and to serve and to participate out here in Window Rock and really across the reservation. So, and this council has obviously been fabulous as well, and thank you for that, Chair Parrish. And for the rest of the council, thank you very much for allowing me to come out and honor me today, and I'm just so thankful. Thank you very much.
So again, thank you, Shinadai. And from my team, we got you a Pendleton blanket. We're going to give it to you even though you wouldn't hire me out of college, so we're going to still honor you anyway.
It reminds me of this.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Picture. Thank you so much.
And on behalf of the 25th Navajo Nation Council, thank you for your partnership, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so touched. So thank you. Once again, thank you again, everybody. It's been an honor. Thank you. I do actually. Okay. Is that okay?
Thank you, Speaker. That concludes our recognition this morning.
Mike? Oh, there you go. So colleagues, if you want to be part of the group picture, the Budget and Finance Committee, if you can come up to the front to take a group photo here. And colleagues, before we do officially call our second day into order, I would also like to do recognition this morning with our Madam Vice President. So we have a very special guest with us this morning, and he's known throughout the world, an amazing athlete, and is always a good advocate and a very inspirational to our younger people, and being a former, an athlete in high school, junior high, and I always used to watch him on TV when I was little. So it's really good to have one of our role models here this morning, our own PGA champion, 4-time. We have Mr. Notah Begay here with us. So at this time, we'll allow him to introduce himself here to the council. Mr. Begay, welcome home. It's nice to have you here in the people's home.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and appreciate the opportunity to interrupt the proceedings here for just a brief moment. To all the council delegates, administration staff, invited guests, this is a great opportunity for me to come back and just visit sort of the epicenter of so much that happens in our communities. And I'm a big proponent of building community. I've invested my time with our Navajo youth throughout my entire career, and I've always represented the Navajo people around the world when I play golf. They always ask where you're from, and they always know that Begay means Navajo, and I'm very proud of that. But, I just wanted to say thanks. Thanks to all of you for your time, your energy, your effort, your inspiration, all the hard work that you put into making very difficult decisions on behalf of our community. And I see a lot of young adults here that are coming here to observe. I don't know what their role is here, but that's who we're advocating for. That's who we're fighting for. So my thoughts and my best wishes are with you as you embark and deal with some very difficult issues related to a number of things that are of great need in Navajo. And however I can support moving down the road, please don't hesitate to ask, because as I've passed my professional golf career, I'm now doing television, and one of my biggest goals is to continue to give back and contribute to our young people and inspire them to maybe play a professional sport or graduate from Stanford University or go into broadcast television. Any one of those three would be great. But a kehat, and again, have a good session, and I wish you the best. Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Begay, for joining us here this morning on our second day. Many of our students are here with us. I'm pretty sure they all look up to you like I have, and being able to be our champion for our youth and being an athlete globally. So you do inspire each and every one of us. Again, good morning to our relatives that are listening online. Do kodon khliho yahagi lo yat etan khidini to kodon khalchinen khahas khegi lo yat eto baltra no linigi lo yat etan khidini. And good morning to our young generation that is here with us in the chamber. It's good to see you on the floor. So we'll give that opportunity to recognize our youth here. So our students are visiting us from Ganado High School, their Navajo government class. So good morning, students. And at this time, colleagues, we did have roll call open, and We do have 19 members present here in the council chambers, and that does constitute a quorum, and we will reconvene our session, our day 2 session at 10:21 a.m. So colleagues, just to recap from yesterday, we did adopt our agenda. We did receive the State of the Nation address from Madam Vice President. We did get a receiving report from the Chief Justice of the Navajo Nation. I also reported on the Speaker's report of the Navajo Nation Council, and we did recess late in the evening, and that was passed by a vote, and within that motion, it was to continue reports on day 2. So colleagues, we will move forward with our agenda here. We will be moving to number 7, receiving financial report from the controller. So Controller, if you could come to the presenters table. And colleagues, the report was emailed, and you should also have a hard copy as well. So colleagues, I will have the controller do his 20-minute report, and then I will proceed with a motion and a second. Controller, you will have 20 minutes on the board for your presentation.
Good morning again, Shinada. One more time for the record, my name is Sean McCabe. My clans are Ashi'i Nishle and Tachitni Basishchin. And had quite an eventful morning, so time to get to business. Shinada, what I'll be presenting for the next 20 minutes is the financial report from the Office of the Controller. First off, as always, thank you, Shinada, for your leadership. I know it's a lot of hard decisions are being presented with us every day, and I really appreciate the leadership of the 25th Navajo Nation Council and the leadership of the Office of the President and Vice President. For helping us navigate what is really some historical times for the Navajo Nation as we move toward these ARPA expenditures, and really trying to get the processes right within the Navajo Nation so that our money is accepted and distributed freely. So with that, Shinadai, I'd like to go through my report. I'll be touching on basically four main topics. Some of these are repeats from the last report, but they're updates that are important to the Navajo Nation. As always, I've included exhibits that have detailed financial information for the council's review, etc. I'd like to start with where we're at with the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA. I do know I've heard the concerns of the council on the issues and concerns you're getting from your chapters, and working very hard to try and get those situations and those hurdles and roadblocks worked out so our money can begin to flow to the people. The Office of the Controller was able to work with the Office of President and Vice President, the 25th Navajo Nation Council, as well as several other Navajo Nation divisions to reallocate remaining ARPA funds. As you recall, this happened just this summer. This effort was a collaboration of efforts to reprioritize the remaining ARPA funds received by the Navajo Nation in 2021. Part of this effort, per the United States Treasury guidelines, state, local, and tribal governments can obligate ARPA funds to reimburse the Navajo Nation General Fund for expenditures made during the pandemic, which the Treasury defines as March 2021 through today, for government services. And after several months of leadership meetings and workshops, OOC calculated and found the expenditures to reimburse the general fund to be approximately $522 million, which, by the way, is a number that was reviewed by the man you just honored, Mr. John Kennedy. So we're pretty comfortable with that number at this point. This allocation effectively removes ARPA deadlines and restrictions and is available to the Navajo Nation for its priorities. Since the passage of this historic legislation, Shinatda, the Office of the Controller has worked with executive divisions, the 25th Navajo Nation Council, and the Budget and Finance Committee to, one, analyze encumbrances that existed on June 27, 2024, to evaluate the likelihood of the expenditures of these existing encumbrances. If you recall, Shinatda, when we passed CMY 2824, we included, there was a fair dollar amount of dollars that had already been encumbered as ARPA. We left those dollars alone, and per the AG's memo, which we followed, was to reevaluate those encumbrances, not as of the deadline that was the June 30th. We were instructed to use the June 17th deadline, which is the day that the president signed the legislation. Shinatda, there is still a fair dollar amount of encumbrances that exist that we still need an evaluation on, and I'm working closely with the Budget and Finance Committee. We've identified those encumbrances with a report that I gave Budget and Finance of dollars that still remain encumbered. I think what is the next step and task for Budget and Finance Committee and this council is to really do an honest evaluation as to whether or not those encumbrances will actually be spent. Keep in mind, Shinatda, we do have a looming November 1st deadline where any unencumbered ARPA funds will revert to a hardship. And I know that's a very serious topic of discussion within this council. And then anything that we do remain encumbered as of November 1st, Shinatda, we have to have it encumbered per the Treasury guidelines as of December 31st, 2024. So as you can imagine, time is getting really, really tight on what we can do with this remaining ARPA money. Also, Shinatda, remember, as of December 31st, 2024, once it's allocated, we have to spend it for the reason allocated. So we have a fair bit of work to do, I think, between now and the end of the year, and certainly between now and the 11/1 deadline, when CMY 2824 has a clause that any unencumbered ARPA expenditures would automatically revert to a hardship program. And I'll explain that a little bit more in a second. Two, the Office of the Controller is able to monitor the encumbrances and expenditure status of remaining ARPA projects to evaluate the likelihood of completion of allocated funding by the Treasury's December 31, 2026 deadline, while we're also preparing for a potential hardship allocation on November 1, 2024. Shinatda, remember, we have worked very diligently, and I want to thank the Budget and Finance Committee for working closely with the Office of the Controller in monitoring these encumbrances and expenditures, because I think the second question that this council needs to ask itself when it comes to ARPA is, there's a lot of money that is currently encumbered for ARPA projects, but what's the likelihood that those dollars are actually going to get spent? Because we do have to make a decision on that fairly quickly between now and December 31, 2024. And I know this council, through NABI work sessions, has called various divisions to the table, also enterprises like NTUA and NECA, to get an evaluation on how many of those dollars will realistically be spent by 2026. Always keep in mind, Shinatda, that the goal of all of this is that we don't give a dime back to the federal government. We have to make sure that we're very cognizant that a very real possibility exists that if this is not planned right and not monitored correctly, that we could give money back to the federal government on December 31, 2026. And the Office of the Controller is happy to work with this council, the Office of the President and Vice President, to make sure that stuff like that doesn't happen. Third, the Office of the Controller successfully moved close to 400 ARPA-related K accounts to general fund N accounts. This effectively made funds available to continue the Delegate Region project plan. We have addressed questions about any new processes necessary to expend these funds and communicated that OOC does not require any new process to push projects forward. Shinatda, I think this is a very important bullet because, as you know, we moved $522 million from the ARPA accounts over to this the so-called 522 fund, or 521 fund, or RRR fund, which is essentially what we did is we took amounts, again, that we spent on government services and reimbursed the general fund. What has happened since that time is there's been a lot of miscommunication and disconnect as to how those funds can now be expended. The Office of the Controller has been in several meetings with divisions and even chapters. I was able to meet with chapters last week that in a kind of a work session called by DCD and FRF, which I'm thankful that they did, but there still remains a lot of questions as to how these chapters get a hold of this money and are able to expend it. I'm here to say officially in front of this council and in my written report that the Office of the Controller doesn't believe new processes need to be developed to get money out the door. From an accounting standpoint, we simply moved money from one pot of funds, which was the ARPA money, over to the general fund. That won't foundationally change any practice that we have at OOC to move money. Now, the question needs to be asked, what is DCD requiring of the chapters, and what are they requiring of the SRA chapters, which are the certified chapters? Right now, I'm not here to say anything more than there seems to be some confusion still. The position of OOC, though, officially, again, in front of this council, is we don't see any need to change any processes on the accounting side. When things get pushed through to us, my team will get checks out the door. I mean, that's really how simple the OOC operation should be. Fourth, we were able to work with our oversight, which is the Budget and Finance Committee and the Executive Branch, to reallocate funds from existing ARPA projects to administrative costs allowed by the Treasury. Shinata, if you recall in CMY 28-24, this council allocated $15 million to continue to fund administrative costs for ARPA funded programs. Our FRF office, our broadband office, was 100% funded by the ARPA money. What we found, Shinata, is that money is going to be short. In order to take advantage of the Treasury guidelines, which allows us to keep on funding these divisions through the ARPA program, we're allowed to do that through 2026 in order to carry out these programs that we still have for ARPA. $15 million is probably not going to be enough to carry these programs through 2026. So I do know we're right in the middle of a comprehensive budget. Keep in mind this is still federal funds, so it's not part of the general fund budget discussion. But I will ask to work with this 25th Navajo Nation Council through the Budget and Finance Committee to make sure we allocate the funds necessary in a fair and transparent way to keep these administrative operations going, because we will have to still administer roughly $800 million in ARPA-related monies through 2026. Also, we've been able to finalize an allocation plan. I would ask to work with this council to finalize an allocation plan before the December 31, 2024 Department of Treasury deadline. I do know we have the looming November 1st deadline, but always keep in mind a lot of money is already encumbered. The question I think that's critical to this council and to the success of how we get these ARPA monies spent is going to be how realistic do those encumbered monies, how realistic are they actually going to be spent? I don't want to comment right now on what my thoughts are, but I do think it's a discussion that needs to be had by this council, again, through the Budget and Finance Committee. I'd also like to ask this council to work to set up the 522 Trust Fund. If you remember the monies that got moved over into the reimbursement, the RRR fund, there's a requirement in CMY 28-24 that a trust fund has to be set up before those expenditures are allowed to be expended. Now, the delegate region plans, there was a clause that allowed the controller to use the UUFB to continue to fund chapter projects, so those are not in really any real danger to stop. But there still are other allocations like the broadband project that cannot move forward until we establish this trust fund. And I've had conversations with Mel Rodas. I'd like to thank him and the team at DOJ for those, but that's another conversation this council needs to have fairly shortly. With that, Shinata, I got 7 minutes. I'll move on to the next one, which is a very important update on the enterprise resource planning system. I've heard very loud and clear the concerns from this council about how monies tend to get stuck in our process, and our process is too slow to get much needed resources, financial resources to our people and our chapters. And so one of the initiatives I took on immediately after I took the office of the controller was to look for a new modern accounting system. I'd like to thank a few people on that. One, Catherine Belzowski at DOJ, who helped us push the contract to where it is now. My team at OOC, Rob Willie, is such an important part of what we do at OOC, and all the team members there, Ms. Christine Chavez, Valerie Batsili, and others. And I'd also like to thank one individual, Ms. Tracy Shorty with DPM. She has taken on the leadership as a project manager to continue to move this forward. Honestly, without her, we'd be even further behind, so I want to make sure she's recognized. As you know, we did select Arctic IT to come in and install a Microsoft 365 platform that works with our current Microsoft 365 environment. We have now currently worked through the contract issues, again, thanks to Catherine Belzowski at DOJ, and we're at a point now where we feel like we're really close to putting the project through the 164 process. If that happens sooner than later, Shinatai, I'm really happy to announce that we can get this implementation started by the first part of November. And if that happens, we can look for this new system to be implemented within 12 to 18 months of that. I'm hoping, Shinatai, we can push that so we can end the fiscal year and start the new one on a new system. As I've reported before, there's a lot of benefits to this. It's going to take a fair amount of training and a fair amount of getting used to, because we're going to now move into a more modern practice of paperless procedures, streamlined processes. I've already started working with the Budget and Finance Committee to really relook at some of these paper processes that we have. For example, the Procurement Act, we do need to make some changes to that. I've presented a flow chart to BNF to consider, and I know working with them will be looking at that act for legislation for amendments fairly soon. We've also looked at the travel and P-card policies. I see delegates sit here sometimes taping old receipts to pieces of paper all the time, and I know that's a cumbersome process. It bogs us down as well. So we are looking to update that to a more modern practice of being able to take receipt photos on your phone and report that way. And I want to thank my team for helping me work through that. Also keep in mind, Shinadai, that we're going to be able to implement not just the new accounting system, but it'll be a significant upgrade to our Department of Personnel Management system, as well as a new budget system that I know Dom and his team have looked at and are very excited for this to come through. And also our census data will now be integrated into the system and protected by the Microsoft environment. So hopefully, you know, Shinatai, once we get this done here in the next 12 to 18 months, you're going to see a lot of benefit. And while I always appreciate your phone calls to help you all get money moving, I hope that those phone calls stop with this new system, because the money will move by itself, and that's the goal. And we also want to make the commitment to transparency and accountability in this new system as well, because this new system will also provide dashboards to this council to monitor and evaluate things like budget to actual, which I know are things that you guys have asked for and have never really been given to this council. And that capability will be an online capability from now on. 3.5 minutes, Shinatai. Let me move to the 2023 audit. We did recognize Mr. John Kennedy this morning. The financial statement audit for the Navajo Nation was issued on time on June 30th, and we just issued the single audit on Friday. It is important to know that the findings that we all are used to for the federal compliance audit, those have been issued to us as of Friday. I've reviewed them. I've written a comprehensive action plan for it, and I'll be meeting with the Budget and Finance Committee very shortly to go through those findings and make sure we come up with a plan to cure those findings. I will say, Shinatai, on a kind of a 30,000 foot level, the one consistent finding in our compliance audit is procurement. We constantly get findings, and this is one area that I've worked already very closely with Budget and Finance to make sure we get these procurement related findings solved. I believe the audit contained 15 to 16 findings this year, and I have to say at least 8 or 9 of them have something to do with procurement. So this is something that I've taken the initiative to work with Budget and Finance Committee to try and amend the current regulations so that we fit into the federal compliance guidelines when it comes to procurement. Because keep in mind, Notah, with this ARPA money, we still need to push $800 million out the door in 2 years. And I can very confidently inform this council that if we don't get procurement right, it's going to be a federal compliance issue that we have to make sure we're ready with now, proactively, instead of reacting when there's a finding down the line. I do know that the topic of the comprehensive budget is I don't need to tell you guys what's going on, you know as well as I do, but I do want to say the Office of the Controller looks forward to working with this body, the judicial branch and the executive branch, to try and push a comprehensive budget as soon as we can. I know the kinds of ins and outs of what happened, but I will say from the Office of Controller that a comprehensive budget is needed sooner than later. We need to get whatever we can to get a comprehensive budget on the table and pass, whatever that might take. And last but not least, I have about a minute left, Shinadai, the citizen balance, which I know has been a focus of conversation to see how we can get those citizen projects moving. I do know there's several $100 million within that fund. A lot of it's currently allocated, but again, we have to ask ourselves as leadership, how many of those projects are realistically moving? And if they're not, why, and how we get those projects moving. Shinadai, I have about 40 seconds left, 35 seconds left, and that'll conclude my report, so thank you.
Thank you, Controller, for that report. And colleagues, I'm going to start off with a motion and a second before we move to questions. We have a motion by Honorable Parrish. Is there a second? Second by Honorable Vince James. And first, for questions, we do have Honorable Amber Kismat-Crotty.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Appreciate it, Speaker. I just want to say I may have missed today's invocation to start the council session, but I appreciate the prayer that was provided by behavioral health, our traditional practitioners, and my hope is that we can incorporate more of that conversation and dialogue. Chiaj, Controller, thank you for your report. What I want to talk about is something regarding the budget. So this has been a challenging budget, reviewing the Appropriations Act, and now seeing from the Attorney General's memo what some of those proposed constrictions might be when we amend laws regarding the budget process. I'm a firm believer that I'm here representing my communities and what we've heard in the public hearings and how we're moving forward with allocating dollars. We would need a look at the Appropriations Act to say, and fully transparent with the public. Like, that's why government development should be talking and giving information out to the people on their government, on the government structure, what happens, because we don't have a lot of say on what the federal government mandates from us. We enter into contracts, we know how it's supposed to be used, same with the state or outside money, but these are Navajo Nation dollars that are generated here. So I would say we need a plan on how to educate the public on their money so that they can access those dashboards and ask questions, and ask a delegate, ask a three-branch chief, ask someone who's in the leadership position so that we're all clear on how we want to move the nation forward. My second thing is when we include in this budget process, we are working on projections, and that's what I want to change on the appropriation law. We're counting on money to come in, but we already have the history that in, was it 2011, we didn't meet that projection. We didn't meet what we thought we were going to get for a budget, and so we're at the front end using your best guess, collecting from minerals, collecting from others, what we anticipate, but we never know when there's the next COVID. We never know when there's a next stock market crash. We need to be prepared as a nation. We're always reactionary. I want to move us to be, how do we plan for the future? And that starts with our budget. Anyone who has a worth of salt knows what you put your money towards and what you've and how you budget your dollars is how you're going to move your nation. And so with that in mind, I want to see how do we change those laws so that we stop using projection and use what we have. The UUFB right now has enough funding to fund us a full fiscal year. And so I want to talk about how can we move forward to have that concept. What does that look like? The other area I want to discuss is then how are we doing master planning for our funding? And so that's, I don't know if that needs to be a directive, but I want to echo what I've said at Budget and Finance. Every delegate here or every constituent should know how money is being allocated, and what we all feel is that our district is being left out. So we need the help of your team to map out all of those funding requests and to say, okay, what districts have benefited? And when there's regional projects, okay, this region has benefited. So that as delegates, we're not fighting each other for limited funds. We're able to plan and say, okay, what was allocated in Sehasin 2018 now does not work in my district 2024 post-COVID. And so we need to re-examine on how we do that. So is it through council that we need to get that consultant to help us with that vision? Or is it through your resources now, knowing our financial complexities, and then hearing the council how we move forward? Because we need complete transparency. And that means every contract that goes through, I should be able to pick one out of the pot and say, is this complying with Navajo Nation law? And we know, as my experience on Budget and Finance, that is not happening. That is not happening. We have individuals in our government who are not complying with Navajo Nation law. I'm going to reserve my seconds. Thank you.
Reserve time of 15 seconds. Next, we do have Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton.
Thank you, Controller, for the report, and thank you, Speaker. So I want to go back to what you stated about the audit, the findings that the audit has revealed in terms of procurement.
Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton, if you could move the mic closer. There you go.
Sorry. The audit and what it revealed, the 15 to 16 findings, I want to know how can you help to fix this, number one. Number two is I did get some information yesterday from your office, Controller McCabe, and I want you to verify. I understand that the Vice President, that President Nygren has asked that Vice President's P card be shut down. I'm guessing it's because I asked her to start traveling to Tibic and to get more involved in Title 17. But can you verify that this came directly from your office? The third thing that I'm going to reserve my time at that. Thank you.
Reserve time of 4 minutes and 4 seconds. Next, we have Honorable Jermaine Simonson.
Good morning, Speaker Curley, as well as colleagues. Thank you, Controller McCabe, for all of that information. I try to keep up as much as I can. And my two questions, one will be on your report on ARPA. I'm wondering who you submit reports to within the federal government. Would it be Department of Treasury? Who does that? Is there a report that goes out to them to let them know how we're progressing and what has been spent and how it's been spent? And so I'm wondering if there's a template that you were given to follow, and if there is, can we take a look at that? How often does that report get submitted? Those will be my first question. My second one is in regards to the new system that you're getting. I didn't get your quote directly, but you said that it would do a lot of work sort of independently, like you might not need as many human resource doing the procurement and all those things anymore. So will then those employees, if they're and you can correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm stating this incorrectly, but you may not need certain positions anymore. And so what will become of those positions? Will they be trained to do something else to help with the system? And so those will be my two questions for now, and I reserve the rest of my time.
Reserve time of 3:22. Next, we have Honorable George Toth.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Also, Koro Natani 25th Navajo Nation Council. Koro report in lay, Mr. McCabe, appreciate that. But I have some three concerns. One is the chapter has not received their allocation. The chapter are stalling. Also, the official are not getting their check being paid for meetings. The other one too, also, how long is it going to take for carryovers for chapters? Right now, all the chapter are stalled because no funding has come from the nation. Khila, who's responsible for that? Your office or community development? I believe the community development is one of the bottleneck to this whole thing. So we need to tell them to get this money out to the chapters. Almost like 3 weeks now. The October 1st, everybody should got their money. Also, veterans are applying for these funding for their needs, but there's no funding. It hasn't come to their account yet. Also, the other question I have also is the senior center. Senior center's always blaming OOC for not processing their contract or information. It takes forever to process some of these documents. Have you upgrade or improved in your office? I'd like to give my time to Shema Honorable Crowdy, the rest of my time, Speaker. Thank you.
Yield time of 2 minutes and 51 seconds to Honorable Crowdy.
Oh, yeah, thank you. So with that being said, what I would like to know is then from your office, if you could provide to this council, in oversight, we've been talking about some of the challenges or anomalies that we're seeing, because if it's not done, if the contracting or the expenditure of the dollars, that's why we've invested so much money in the monitoring and the FRF office. That's all supposed to be on the website per the law. So what I'm asking you is to really do someone else's job. I'll get back to the FRF office when that comes about, but the law says they're supposed to put everything on the website, and anybody, not only a delegate, but anybody is supposed to see how those fundings are being used, how they're monitoring those fundings. Because what we don't want to do is spend every dollar to have a liability in 2, 3, 5 years. We have a liability from other federal funding that we don't talk about. We need to talk about ONSAT. We need to talk about what happened in the past to our broadband, on why our community is not connected, and why the federal government still wants Navajo Nation to pay back funding. That cannot happen with ARPA. That's not going to happen with me. As long, if I'm outvoted, that's fine. You could look at all of the ARPA legislations. I voted against it because there's not enough checks and balances or transparency. These contracts, it's a weird thing that's happening. I hear my colleagues trying to ask questions to figure it out, but it's strange. And what we have to do then is place the funding where there's a low probability that there's going to be any misuse of dollars, or that we're going to have a future liability. That's going to affect our audit, because sooner or later someone's going to have to say we have to put aside money for any future liabilities when it comes to ARPA. And we already know that there is some funky stuff happening. And so what I want to know, Speaker, and for this council is we're receiving work sessions on what's currently happening. What we need to start looking at is how are we going to develop or organize this council, or if you want Budget and Finance Committee to do it, because I think it is shared governance, to start doing hearings and collecting information, because we don't have a whistleblower law. We have employees that are political at will, and I've tried to remove that law. That's something this council can do. If you want to protect employees, we have to stop that political at will, because that's how they're just letting people go, and then they have to disclose to us. There needs to be a process here to protect us.
Thank you, Honorable Crotty. And then going next in queue, we do have Honorable Dr. Andy Nez.
Hakashin Ihiat, Speaker Arokoro Thochna, Controller McCabe. So, first question, as a level of communication, I know we've heard from the Division of Community Development about the K accounts going into the in accounts. They're instructing our chapters that and by memo, that this would be projected either this month or next month. But in your report, you've indicated that that's all been set up and it's ready to go. So I don't know if there's been any communication with the Division for Community Development, because they are directly in contact with a lot of our chapters. We work and communicate effectively with our chapters. And so just that clarity I need on that part of your report. The second is regarding the projected amount for the proposed hardship program. I know that there's been several discussions that it may not be an amount similar to those in the past, and I think, colleagues, this is an opportunity where we consider, as myself as one delegate, our veterans, our elders, and our disabled relatives. Jo Besogi A Doshi Lanta Jo it was like around 540 million or something the first time in 2020. So that projected amount coming from your office. Also on the programs for your office to provide the training, you did outline it in your report, but Department of Health came before Hess and indicated that one of the reasons for their 50% expenditure rate at the end of 3 quarters was because there was not enough training coming from OOC to help their staff be able to conduct and do the processes needed for contractors to come and support the senior centers. So if your office can note that so that you can start to proceed with those type of specific trainings. Also the WGA for All Techs program. I know I inquired about this and I haven't received an update and unsure if that was rectified. And again, as it was mentioned, there's a lot of unknowns, I think, as we start to progress towards our December 2024 deadline. And I'm going to rely heavily on your expertise to allow those mechanisms to fall where they need to go to ensure that we don't send a dime back to the federal government. Speaker, I reserve my time.
Reserve time of 2:19. And I'm going to turn the floor back over to Controller for your responses.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker Curley, and members of the 25th Navajo Nation Council. I appreciate your insight and your questions. Several questions, so I'll get through them. If I miss one, please let me know. I'll start with Honorable Chair Crotty on your questions. You know, the Budget and Appropriations Act, I do believe that's an area that we do need to revisit. I think one of the lessons that can be learned about what's happening right now with this continued resolution is maybe the flaws in the Appropriations Act that need to be considered for future amendment. I'm not necessarily saying anything's wrong with the Appropriations Act, but certainly my attitude has always been, we're not necessarily doing things wrong, we can just do them better. And I do think there's probably some enhancements that I'll definitely work with this council to get the Appropriations Act maybe more in line with the way this nation operates. We have to always keep in mind, Shanetta, and I can tell you this in a lot of confidence, having worked with at least 100 tribes in Indian country, that we're a very unique tribe. You know, one, we're multiple times bigger than most tribes. And so when you hear certain things that affect Indian country, a lot of times you're talking about little tiny tribes, you know, like these tribes that are so small that they can rely on gaming revenues, or they can write $25,000 checks to their people because they have a multi-million-dollar casino and they have 200 tribal members, and that's easy to do. This tribe isn't like that. We're never going to see a $25,000 a month check from the casino. We're just not going to do it. The gaming is a good revenue engine, but the types of things that this nation and our people need to think about is how we become more effective with the dollars that we do have. And I think that, and we do have money. That's the other thing. We do have money. We just need to figure out a way to get the money flowing in a manner that gets resources to the people. And I do believe in education to the public is necessary, and I'm happy to work with this council on how to do that. Either that come directly from my office or a consultant that maybe we can bring on to help educate the process and how these monies move forward, and the importance of, you know, how efficiently the Navajo Nation can receive and get money out the door. Your second question about projections versus actual, I really appreciate your questions on that, Delegate Crotty, and your leadership on this, along with the Budget and Finance Committee. I do think we're kind of riding a dangerous tightrope with this budget. I've made several kind of analogies as to what we're really doing with this budget and the interpretations that we're making with UUFB and other things. And you know, the reality is, as you mentioned, Shanata, is there's going to be years where revenue isn't what the controller projects. There's going to be years where it's going to be more than he projects or she projects. So what I've, just for the information of this council, what I've been talking to the Budget and Finance Committee about is being more proactive in analyzing actual numbers, actual revenue numbers, actual expenditure numbers on a quarterly basis, because I can tell you how much revenue we're going to make all I want. NTEC can tell me what we're going to make in mineral royalties or whatever all they want. Tax Commission can say this is what tax is going to be, but if we don't know what's actually happening, we're kind of riding a little bit of a dangerous tightrope. And I'll give this analogy that I gave to BNF just the other day. It's like in your own household budget, if I came home and I said, family, I'm going to get a raise this year, right? And because I'm going to get a raise, I think we can afford this new car. So we go and we buy this new car and we allocate all this money, but my actual revenue may not meet my projected raise. Now we're stuck with all of these new expenditures without the revenue to support it. And this body, this way of doing things through the Appropriations Act, we put so much focus on our budget, the budget. We do very little analysis on what actual revenue is coming in. I can tell you, this whole budget thing that we've gone through so far, there was a year, just 2022, or I don't know what I wasn't here yet then, but I don't know what we projected in revenue, but I know we suffered an $800 million loss in our portfolio. Stuff like that happens. Now what? Now we got an $800 million maybe unrealized or realized loss in investment income. How did we budget and spend that? Now, fortunately, that market has come back and it all rebounded in 2023, which resulted in more money than I projected in 2023 by a couple $100 million. And that's why the UUFB is now $300 million, where it once was, I think, 50. So it's that kind of ebb and flow that we really need to be careful with in an era where revenue sources to the Navajo Nation are scarce right now. We have very little outlook on how much money is actually going to come to this nation in the future. That's new money, new tax revenues, new minerals, a new economic development project, we've got very little of that information right now. So I am a firm believer that we give divisions what they need to operate, for sure. But at the same time, we need to be very, very careful, because we are in a little bit of a volatile time with our revenues. So I do agree with you, Shinatai, that we do need to start really looking at how we project money, or even if we project it at all, and actually using actual revenue from a time in the future or in the past, or an average. As far as master planning, and you ask about how do we do an analysis spending by district. I don't think that capability is currently in FMIS. I mean, I could be wrong. We've never really been asked to track anything like that. But I do know when we set up this new ERP system, there are parts of our chart of account codes that we can maybe assign numbers to different districts so that we can see expenditures by district, and if not by chapter, which will give a little bit more analysis capability to my office, the Office of Management and Budget, the Office of President, Vice President, and this body to know where expenditures are going. But always keep in mind with the chapter, Shinatai, it's a little bit hard for us to track that, because we make an allocation in this body every year and then we just send them the money. How they actually spend it, we don't really get to see that. They're on a completely different accounting system. Maybe it's worth a conversation how we can enhance that in the future. I hope I answered your questions, Shinatai. I'll move to Chair Charles Newton. So you asked about audit and procurement and how do we fix that. So currently I'm working with the Budget and Finance Committee to make some proposed amendments to the Procurement Act, Shinatai, that hopefully closes some of the situations where there have been federal findings. We do have to be very cognizant of this, and it's good that we try and get ahead of it now, again, ahead of what is going to be a significant expenditure of ARPA funds in the very near future. And as Delegate Crotty said, we don't want to be left with another bag of money that we have to pay back to the federal government in two different manners. One, if we don't expend the money by the ARPA deadline, obviously we owe that back. But two, if we get findings that result in a questioned cost, and at that point have to be reverted because in the manner it was spent, now we're looking at potentially millions of dollars back to the federal government. So we do have to get control of what's happening currently. And that's not my opinion, Shinatai. This is coming from the audit report. My opinion, of course, is obviously we got to get control of this, but the audit report is what tells us what's really going on. And I am working with Budget and Finance to try and fix that. In regards to the Vice President, Chair Charles Newton, there hasn't really been an official memo that came from anyone regarding what happened to the Vice President and the President's actions, but a verbal, I don't want to say directive, but a verbal communication came from OPVP that essentially the Vice President no longer has signatory authority, and she no longer has the ability to make expenditures for her office, including her P card. So the question came to me from my people, what are we supposed to do? I said, this is what I've been told, so you need to put it on hold, at least for now. I know the Office of the Vice President, President and Vice President made a press release on, or a press conference on what I think was interpreted as the Vice President's no longer having these authorities, but that was communicated to my office. So right now, my office is operating under, we can't, we're not moving anything from the Vice President forward. So if that changes, obviously we're more than happy to put that back to active. But as of right now, that's kind of what we've been communicated, Shinata. I hope that answers your questions, Chair Charles Newton. Delegate Simonson, the ARPA reports, ma'am, are Treasury reports that happen quarterly, and there is a reporting portal. And in that portal, we're required to report actual expenditures and obligations. And I can tell you that I recently had a call with the Treasury. It's been a couple months now, but I do know there's still concerns about how we're still unobligated funds, that they're really wondering, how are you guys going to get this spent? Now, this was pre-CMY 28-24, so I think with CMY 28-24 and the efforts by the Executive Office to encumber these monies, we'll have a more favorable report to the Treasury in the next quarter. But right now, we are required to report quarterly actual expenditures, money that we're obligating for which expenditure categories, and we've been able to keep up to date on those quarterly reports to date. If this council would like to see copies of those, we'd be happy to provide that to the council for your analysis as well. Delegate Simonson, you asked about the new ERP system and how that might affect the staffing at OOC. Shinata, I can't really say exactly how it's going to affect my office or anyone's office, but what I can say is, I'm not going to speak for the other divisions, but I can tell you in my office, we tend to continue to throw people and money at problems. And so if there is an effort to fix a problem, we say we're understaffed or we don't have enough people. In my office, I can honestly say, I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I'm not saying we're not understaffed, but what I can say is there's a lot of processes we do, especially paper, that if we got rid of that, now we've got open time. We're not going to need those types of things anymore. And what I'm trying to really instill at the Office of the Controller is a work smarter, not necessarily work harder, but work smarter. And what I'm hoping that does is it takes away the everyday just, we got to churn out this information, to actually more value-added analysis, reporting. I know one of the things we just don't do well here is reporting. I know this council asks me for numbers and reports all the time, and that really should just, and the executive branch, and that should just be a normal thing. Every month you get a budget to actual statement. You can tell us where your budget's off, and we can help you fix it. Right now, a lot of it comes to OOC, and we're scrambling around trying to figure out what's really happening. And there's not a lot of value add to that. We're just treading water. So what I'm hoping with this new system, it's not necessarily to lay off people at my office. It's really an effort to say, okay, now we've got a lot of these things that you were working on in the past fixed. Let's start working smarter and better so that we can get better information to the leadership that needs it. And they will be trained on that. It's part of the overall budget for the implementation. I hope that answers your questions, Delegate Simonson. To Delegate Toth, you asked specifically about the chapter allocations. So, Shinata, I can tell you, Delegate Yanito texted me on this very issue. There was, because of the CR and some of the I guess, I don't know if it's miscommunication, but definitely misinterpretation of what it meant and how it was going to work. The budgets that were set up for the chapters, there were some mistakes that needed to be fixed. Unfortunately, sir, I can't speak to that. That's an OMB function. So we're waiting for, I think, all of those chapter budgets to be set up and fixed correctly in the system, and then money will come out the door. Will be moved out the door. But I can say that I did get an update as of, I don't know if it was yesterday or last week at NABI, when Delegate Yanito asked me that only 14 chapters at this point have pushed for their money to be allocated. So once we get those requests from the chapters through the process, we'll get the money out the door. But right now, we're working to get those budgets set up in the system. And again, that's an OMB function, not necessarily OOC. But we'll do everything we can to help that process and get the money as quickly as possible. And I can imagine that also affects the carryover amounts, because if the budget's not set up, it won't carry over to the new account. Although we did go through our closeout on September 30th. So I think at this point, Shinata, we're probably waiting for those budgets to be set up and that we can get the money out the door. And we're happy to help on that for sure. You asked about the senior center. Sir, I'll have to, my team's actually in attendance. They might be able to answer this to you directly. We'll figure out, I don't know exactly what the issue is with senior center, but if there's money being held up, we'll do what we have to do to get the money out as well. And I hope that answers your question, sir. Delegate Nez, you asked about K accounts to N accounts. I don't know why, I honestly don't know why your chapters are being told it's not set up, because it's been done for over a month now. And this was a collaboration between OOC and OMB. And actually OMB deserves a lot of credit for sitting down and taking 300 and some, almost 400 K accounts and moving them over to N accounts. So in our office, just by the way the system works, once those are set up, then we have to do certain things to turn those accounts on to be usable, but they're ready. I don't know why DCD is saying what they're saying. I'm not pointing the finger at DCD, but that might be a question more suitable for DCD at that point. It's funny that you mentioned, Notah, that the Department of Health is, so one thing I'm learning in the 18 months I've been here is pretty much anything that happens on the Navajo Nation is the Office of the Controller's fault. I don't know why they're saying 50% of their budget is our fault. There's no way that's true. Absolutely no way. I can say that we do have issues, Notah. I'm working hard with my team to fix those issues. I'm not saying we're not part of the problem, but we're certainly not the entire problem. If there's a training that needs to happen at the Department of Health, my sister Cheryl Yazzie, I'm sure can work out something to help them. But the fact of the matter is, you all have reached out to me at some point or another about some payment, and I always get right on it. And I can tell you, I think you all can attest to this, that when I come back to you, 9 times out of 10, I say, we don't even have it. Some other division has it. DCD might have it. DOH might have it. So this communication that OOC is just sitting on all this stuff is just not, it's not entirely true. I'm not saying we're not, and we don't have faults, but you know, I'm trying hard to work with the divisions to get this stuff put together, and I think this speaks to some of these issues we're having with procurement and other things, because a lot of times when we get the paperwork, we find that it may not have been procured correctly, and so we have to send it back. Then we get blamed for holding it up, when in fact, if it was done properly in the first place, it wouldn't be an issue. Notah, I'm certainly not to try and point fingers at my colleagues in the executive side. I just want there to be an understanding that, you know, my team just doesn't hold things up to hold them up. We're trying to get stuff out the door as well. And we'll definitely work with you and DOH to get money out the door. You asked about Daltech, sir. I don't know the answer to that, but I'll definitely get it before today's over and get you an answer. And then the projected amount for ARPA, you know, right now, it's just hard to say. It's really hard to say, but it's definitely going to be something that needs to be discussed. Obviously, it's October 22nd, so we're 9 days from the 1st, and that automatic reversion back to hardship. I do know through some of the presentations that you all saw at NABI last week, there are at least one division who's saying the water department, that money might come back, that's not going to be used. And I also know NTUA has also professed that there might be money coming back. Unless there's a reallocation of that money to a different project, that could very well be part of the hardship pot. Always keep in mind too, Notah, that there is an automatic reversion clause in CMI 2824 to bring back any unencumbered money on that date. But again, as part of my first part of my report, there's still going to have to be an honest look of what's currently encumbered that we just don't think is going to be spent, because we still do have until December 31st, 2024 to reallocate that too if need be. And I know this body has called various divisions and enterprises to see the reality of how that money is going to get spent, or if it's going to get spent. But that's something that very definitely needs to be finalized, and those honest, hard conversations happen in the next 68 days, because we're coming up on December 31, 2024. I believe I answered all the questions. Shinadai, if I missed one, please let me know.
Controller, if you could help answer Honorable Crotty's question in regards to the FRF monitoring liabilities and also the creation of the whistleblower law.
I'm sorry, Speaker, I misunderstood the last one,
Honorable Crotty did mention the need for a whistleblower law, and especially with the conflicts that we see with political at-will employees. I believe that was her reference.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Shinat, Chair Crotty, I apologize for missing your question. So specifically to the risk and ARPA, you know, being a former auditor myself, I can tell you that all audit procedures are based on risk. I can't speak for the team at KPMG, but what I can tell you is a few things. One, the amount of money that's still left to be spent, which is roughly $800 million in 2 fiscal periods, makes it a risky program inherently. Two, the fact that we've had repeat findings on CARES and ARPA, and also findings on procurement will also raise the risk level. So I can speak just as my training and my professional career as an auditor that I can pretty much say that ARPA in and of itself is a risky program for a single audit risk assessment. For those reasons and others, I do think that what we need to be very cognizant of as the governing body, along with the executive staff, is you know, given some of the findings that we've seen repeated over the past 2 to 3 years, that we have to be very careful. And again, I just want to reiterate our procurement efforts. Those are issues that we're having in our audits and continue to have in operations, and it does put some of this money at risk, Shinata. And that's why, you know, I know the Budget and Finance Committee under the leadership of Chair Parrish, Vice Chair Slater, and yourself, ma'am, have moved to really start relooking at that Procurement Act to see how we can start shoring up that procurement effort. I do think, as your controller, you know, being fully transparent, there is an elevated level of risk with this ARPA money that we need to be very cognizant of and make sure we're doing things in a manner that we mitigate risk and keep our audit risk down. As far as the whistleblower law, Shinata, I really don't know. We probably need one in place if there isn't one. That actually might probably be better for DOJ to answer. But I do know, you know, they're part of internal controls, and this is where we kind of miss sometimes because we follow the BIM. Sometimes I'm not sure we're really cognizant of the effects on the financial statements, nor are we cognizant of the internal control side of it. And that's where a lot of my expertise lies in. And I did have a meeting with KPMG when they were finalizing the audit report a couple weeks ago, and we talked about what can the Office of the Controller do to strengthen these internal controls. And one of the things that is recommended by what they call it's not the yellow book, I think it's the orange book, is the federal government, not the federal government, but the JFOA recommends that tribal governments follow what they call the COSO framework for internal controls. And what that does is it provides a lot of definitions and overall control environment type policies for tribes to adopt. And one of those, and a key internal control in any organization, is a whistleblower type avenue. And I don't know where that sits here, Shinadai, honestly, and again, I think that might be better served for DOJ, but one of the things I do want to bring to BNF sooner than later is having the Navajo Nation adopt that COSO framework, because then it really defines exactly what the internal control process, the control environment, something that we call in auditing the tone at the top. And what that means is any internal control environment is always the press, or not the precedents, but it's driven by the people at the top. And right now, if we have instances in management where the tone at the top isn't one where internal controls is at the forefront, it's going to trickle down. And these are some of the things that I've always talked about with the Budget and Finance Committee when it comes to things like management override and other things. I think one of the things I'm trying to accomplish with the BNF committee is to start laying down that framework so that there is some sort of and I'm not a lawyer, but at least a policy framework that tells us this is what we need to do from an internal control standpoint. Not only the environment, but all the control processes down. I will say I think we're kind of missing that mark a little bit, and we need to make sure that that's strengthened. I hope I answered your question, ma'am.
Thank you, Controller. And colleagues, I'm going to move forth with questions here. We do have next Honorable Carl Slater.
Thank you, Controller, and thank you for whoever brought this burrito in the South Conference Room this morning. It's excellent. Controller, are you aware of attempted management or successful management override of Office of the Controller employees, and who either possesses the power to do that, or where did that originate from? Who attempted to perform management override? Second, are you aware of work without contracts, and that is avoiding procurement and trying to do it after the fact and starting work, like I said, before there is the appropriate procurement action has been completed for the task that needs to be delivered? And if so, where are some problem areas that you're seeing right now, or what offices are experiencing that issue and trying to get you to cover it up after the fact? And then second, going back to the comprehensive budget, in the second to last paragraph of the President's veto message, he says the council will have $712,606 to continue its operations and to continue efforts to prioritize the passage of a comprehensive budget for FY 2025. Goes on to say that we can draw money from the other legislative branch programs, which I don't think is appropriate, but is clearly indicative of how they see the executive branch, probably some sort of unitary executive. And then over here says, in comparison, the Office of the President and Vice President will have $237,456 for the next 6 months. This not only does the Navajo Nation Council have far more funds and resources than the OPVP, but it manages far less employees than the OPVP. It should be far fewer. So let's go to the FY 2025 budget reconciliation. I see business unit 101001, and I just confirmed this with Rob Willey. That's Navajo Nation Council budget. It says $1,086,849. And then if you go down to the President's office, it says $2,070,325 for 103001. So I wanted to ask, when they issued the line item veto message, did they contact you to see if anything they were saying was correct, or did they just make these numbers up without your knowledge? I'll reserve my time.
Reserve time of 2:34. Next, we have Honorable Danny Simpson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, members of the 25th Council. Good morning. Good morning, staff. Good morning, guests that are listening. Madam Speaker, I'd like to request if we can give, Controller, good morning. I'd like to request to give additional time to the Controller to complete his report. Again, I'm looking at the report on federal funds. There's a large amount of funds that have not been expended. So I'd like to request, Madam Speaker and members of the 25th Council, maybe allow the Controller additional 15 minutes to complete his report. I reserve my time. Thank you, Madam Speaker, members of the council.
Reserve time of 4 minutes and 11 seconds. And turn back the floor to Controller for that information and also to Vice Chair Slater's questions.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker Curley. 25th members of the 25th Navajo Nation Council. Vice Chair Slater, for your question, sir. Your first question has to do with management override, and your second has to do with contracts being worked on or work being done without contracts and potentially procurement happening after the fact. Shinata, I would probably, if details are needed, I'd obviously want to try and do that in executive session. But what I can say on the record is it's been a challenge with my office when it comes to various divisions or others meeting with my staff one-on-one and potentially changing the course of operations or changing the process. It is something that I have communicated to various divisions, including the Office of the Vice Presidents, through emails. It has been a bit of an issue. I did get a chance to meet with the Attorney General and talk a little bit about some of this, and I think between her and I, we've come up with at least maybe a strategy or an understanding of how we can try and fix this moving forward. But you know, I think the practice has been, and I've met with my team on several occasions on this, and it just seems like over the years this is just maybe part of how the way things have been done, where members of a division, and I can't single out anyone because it seems to happen where my staff even get bullied, to be honest with you, into situations that I know I have requested of my staff, please bring those situations to me. I don't want you talking to members of other divisions. You know, obviously everyday reporting things or course of business, absolutely, but if there's ever an instance where they feel like they're being told to do something contrary to that I've said, to have that come to my office and I'll deal with it. And it's not to say that I don't disagree with every single one of them. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, I guess they're right, let's do it this way. But it has been a bit of a challenge, Shinata. As far as work being done without contracts, yeah, that is happening. It's part of one of the reasons why we're trying to get procurement shored up and just a better process. Again, you know, I can't say that I blame, I'm not going to be one to say I blame people for this. It's a process that I think has always been there, and so there's been an ability to do this. I've learned over time in my own personal life that people will do what they can get away with. The people will do what you let them do. And I think that's one of the reasons why we really need to strengthen the policies and procedures around procurement, because there are, and again, I'm not going to get into details on the record, but if there is a need to hear details, I'm more than happy to talk in executive session. But there are instances where contracts move forward without work moves forward without a contract, to the point where I know my team's sitting over here and they're probably nodding their heads because we'll get vendors that show up asking for checks and we don't even know. We have no idea who, you know, there's nothing really in line. So we're trying to get that under control, Shinata, and just strengthen all the way around how we're doing things. As far as the numbers in the president's line item veto, I mean, I wasn't really confirmed with that much on that. I did see it at the very end. I was called over from, I think, a NABI meeting to just kind of take a look at it, but it was right before it actually went out. But as far as the compiling of the numbers, I didn't have a whole lot to do with that. In fact, It's one of the reasons why I mentioned last week, I think one of the vendors was presenting numbers, and I suggested that council really think about instituting a policy that before numbers are made public or spoken in this chamber and available to the public, that they're verified by the Office of the Controller, because the fact is a lot of divisions do have access to FMIS and can pull numbers, but how those numbers are reported, unless verified by the Office of the Controller, we don't know. Really, they can say, I'm not saying they're doing it, but there is a risk that they could tell you whatever they want to tell you without some sort of a verification from the Office of the Controller. And I by no means infer that that's what's happening, but that is a risk, Shinata. Delegate Simpson, I think you just, your question about unspent federal funds, if I'm granted more time, I can go through it, but the general comment I would make, Shinata, is there is hundreds of millions of dollars in unspent funds. It goes back years. Some of these monies that don't get spent goes back into the early 2000s. And it is something that I think we need to get shored up, because I've never been to a TIBIC meeting, nor have I been to a meeting at the federal level to advocate for more money, but I can tell you, if we're not spending the money, asking for more is going to be a really hard sell. So at some point, and I have met with division directors on this, particularly those that are federally funded, on how we can start moving these monies forward. And there are ideas coming out that we can try and start moving this money, but it's certainly something that we need to continue to monitor financially, Shinata. And keep in mind, one of the numbers that I'll put out there is, as of the 2023 fiscal audit, there was over $2 billion in federal money, what we call unearned income. And when one of the footnotes of the financial statements, which I'll be happy to walk the council through at another time, lists the funding sources of where that money is. And what unearned income means, unearned revenue means, is it's money that the federal government has forward funded, meaning it's in our bank that we haven't spent yet. It's recorded as a liability on our books because the theory behind it is it's money that we have that haven't spent. Per governmental accounting regulations, you don't recognize federal revenue until money is spent. So revenue will always equal expenditures in the grant fund. You'll never see a fund balance in a federal, on our books. So the theory is, if we get $1 million up front for a grant, we only spend $800,000. Revenue will match the $800,000. The offset, the $200,000, is what's called unearned revenue. And it's recorded as a liability on our books because the theory is we owe it to the purpose of the grant, or we owe it back to the federal government. And right now, the 2023 audit report reports over $2 billion. Now, to be fair, over $1 billion of that is the ARPA issue that we're dealing with right now. But it still leaves almost $1 billion in other federal money that is currently sitting in our bank account that hasn't been spent yet. And again, that's money that goes back years, carry forward money that we haven't really gotten out the door. So I don't know if you want me to go into details in my report, Delegate Simpson, but that's my general answer, sir.
Controller, if you may, maybe go back into your report, if you do, on the federal funds, and then we can move forward back with questions.
Sure, thank you, Shanetta. I got to see which exhibit it is. I'm sorry.
Point of privilege raised by Honorable Simpson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, members of the 25th Council, again, Yateto staff, guests that are listening. Madam Speaker, the response back from the controller in reference to some additional information he likes to give to the council stemming from the question from Delegate Slater. Some of the information that we need to hear has been executive session here. So Rule 16, point of privilege, any council delegate may raise a point of privilege to receive additional documents. So those documents can include either verbally or hard copies. So with that, I raise a question of privilege to get those additional information or documents to be given to the council. So I'd like to make them, we need guidance to how we go into executive session, because I'm raising this point of privilege that we need to go into executive session to hear these additional information stemming from the question from Delegate Slater. So through your leadership as a speaker, I'm not sure how we can go from executive session, request for executive session, or maybe through your leadership, you can just request to go to executive session and get these additional information. Madam Speaker, yeah.
Thank you, Honorable Simpson, on that point of privilege. And colleagues, we are operating on our Navajo Nation's rules of order. So there is within our rules how to conduct an executive session, and it will require a motion. So any delegate can present that motion for an executive session, and then the colleagues here can do a majority vote for an executive session. So that main motion for an executive session can take place within your 5 minutes allotted time. Thank you. And Controller, so if you could give additional details on the federal funding exhibit that you have in your report.
Yeah, thank you, Shinata, Speaker Curley, and Delegate Simpson for the question. So I would turn your attention to Exhibit F in the report. It's the active BIA IHS report. And at the top, you'll see, I think, what Delegate Simpson's referring to in the Department of Health. There's a current budget balance of over $235 million. Division of Public Safety, $19.6 million. Excuse me, in the Department of Social Services, there's 2.9. And then as you move down, there's other really business units. The ones that I think are federally relevant are social services. There's a budget balance of $40.4 million. Some of these other divisions are either not federally funded or a mix of federal funding. Department of Transportation is not listed there, Shinata, but I can tell you in the audit report there is a significant amount of carryover funds that still need to be expended. One thing I will mention, Shinata, is keep in mind that this is really the budget balance, and the unearned revenue balance might be different from this. And again, what the unearned revenue balance tells us is it's the actual money that sits in the account that's unexpended. What this report is telling us, this is what they budgeted and didn't spend. So it's a little bit different. One's more based on actual, the other one's based on a budget. But I think the overall message, Delegate Simpson, is there is a fair amount of money left to be spent in federal funds that have been received and not yet expended. If there's any other questions or other detail, I'd be happy to help to provide that as well.
Thank you, Controller. And colleagues, I'm going to go back to Q's and Q for additional questions. We do have Honorable Chair Brenda Jesus.
Yat e bene, good morning, Madam Speaker. Do yat e bene shanat ani no liningi 25th Navajo Nation Council. And then I also want to greet good morning to our staff and also our relatives that are present here in the gallery and listeners on the call. So Ado Yat shanat ani Controller McCabe for providing the financial snapshot of the Navajo Nation through your quarter report. I just have two quick questions. One is in regards to that 521, 522 trust fund that you mentioned. In regards to developing this trust fund, I know that the broadband office was appropriated $77.6 million for 34 projects that Resources Development Committee wanted them to make a priority to expend these dollars. I know that it's a combination for both towers for the areas that are dead zone, and then also fiber optic lines that will be run to what are called the libraries, but chapters. So with that, I know that the team there with Broadband Office has been initiating their scope of work and how they wanted to get these particular projects out of the way so that these communities will have accessibility to internet connectivity. So in terms of timeline and setting up this trust fund, if you could just share, with my colleagues and I here as to what we need to do to expedite this trust fund immediately, and then would it require, another, I'm assuming it will require council legislation. The other concern I have, and I'm glad that you brought this particular issue up, is the procurement concerns. We're working with Division of Community Development and other divisions that have been issuing contractual services to priority 1, 2s, and 3s. But it's very unfortunate, and what I've coming across is the Navajo Nation Department of Justice legal counsels haven't been really consistent with their legal advisement to contractors. There are some contracts that have been pushed through and some contracts are being held back. And oftentimes through the NABOA, we're talking about priority 1s. Right now with these ARPA dollars, a lot of our priority 1 contractors and consultants are overloaded with projects, which with this draws concerns of the quality of work that the Navajo Nation is anticipating as a final result. And I did bring this up to some of my colleagues as to how do we give opportunity, because we know priority 1s are overstacked, opportunity to priority 2s and 3s. And again, it's a concern that I have, because right now a lot of these priority 1s are repetitively getting contracts, but if we're going to meet that deadline date of December 2026, then how does that really look? Is that even attainable? So those are the two questions I have, Controller McCabe, and I'd like to go ahead and reserve the rest of my time, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Reserve time of 1:44. And just a reminder for our guests in the gallery, if you could please put your cell phones on silent, so it would be disruption here for our session. And going next to Honorable Shauna Ann Pla.
Thank you, Shadeja, Madam Speaker, and then to Mr. McCabe, thank you for the report. I do have 3 issues that I want to address this morning, and I want to say good morning to all those that are listening online, and also good morning to all our Navajo Nation employees. So the first one I wanted to bring up is what you covered earlier on broadband. We do have some issues that are unresolved with the Resources and Development Committee. The first one is that these leases will need to be created for the towers, and we have been having discussions with Accounts Receivable Department, but those follow-ups and follow-throughs have not occurred. So the reason that we need those leases to be created is to improve the collection of taxes on behalf of the Navajo Nation. And then also with the current contract with Vertical Bridge, some of the obstacles we have seen is accepting the payments, also the details of the contract, and then also issuing the taxes. So we hope to get those resolved before moving forward with our ARPA broadband. The second thing that I wanted to bring up is our tribal ranches. So RDC, we recently received a listing of all of the ranches that are under the Navajo Nation. However, I do believe that there is a need for OOC and the Accounts Receivable Department to revisit the leases. Also, we did have the BIA come forth to RDC, and they have proposed an increase in the lease amounts. So we do need to address that, and we will need your assistance with that. The third issue I want to address is regarding the U.S. Department of Treasury quarterly reports. And I'm glad that Shema Delegate Simonson did bring this up. But in regards to our certified chapters, some of them have already drawn down their funds and they have those in their accounts. And I want to know, how are you ensuring that these chapters are making the reports to the U.S. Department of Treasury, as they will have to obligate and complete their projects by 2026. So right now, I believe that those reports are not being submitted to the Treasury. I know they are receiving reports at the DED, and so those are two separate things. And so we'll need your assistance with that. And then also, just in final closing, I think that OOC does need those reports to be submitted. And then also, just to ensure that the Navajo Nation is not at risk for paying back those funds. So those are some of the primary concerns that I have, and I'll reserve the rest of my time. Thank you.
Reserve time of 1:49. Next, we have Honorable Nathan Notah.
Yate, Speaker Curley, the 25th Navajo Nation Council and Controller Kudo with your report. I do have several questions. Number one is, I think you mentioned that with the ARPA funds, there's a possibility of using the UUFB funding to do some of those projects and maybe pay that back. Can you clarify that for me? That's question number one. I'd like to get that clarified. Number two, you indicated that we as Navajo Nation, we do have money, and we've got to do a better job of getting that money flowing out there. We've got to get it out the door. You just talked about liability with the federal government having, we're using some of their funding. Are we doing anything from your office or from any perspective of trying to get those funds out to the communities and out to the people? What do you recommend that we work on? And is there something that the council could do to help expedite this process? Number three, your ERP system. You indicated here that we are happy to see that the information is getting into the 164 process. With that 164 process, I think a lot of that is with the executive department. How long do you expect that to take before we can get that ERP system online? Those are my three questions. Yeah, I reserve my time.
Reserve time of 3:06. Then going next to Honorable Vince James.
Yat Speaker, Ado members of the council, Dolsha Kahasinko, Yat Benin Hidini Dole, Ado Aden Controller, Beso Bahaya has Anje Hot Nahanan Neshako Kwanza the whole Jishko. Ako Kodoshin Abelagana, Bezajishin Eya Kodo na Dishkidole, Shat Kahasinko, Aja Benina. Begay hiti nido benina eya isa dadits ande. Please forgive me for speaking English this morning, Dole. I really am very concerned that you indicated there is work being done out there with no contract in place. And you know, if we're going to be doing the work out there where there is no contract in place, and it's ARPA funding, and it's federal funding, do we not know that if we get audited and we misuse federal funding, that someone will go to federal prison? How do we not understand that. You can do all you want to with general funds, but if you're going to misuse the ARPA funding, which is federal funding, we are liable of having someone go to federal prison. And so with that, I am very, very concerned. I hate to do this, but I'm going to make a motion to go into executive session for 30 minutes to find this information. And I just want my colleagues of the 25th Navajo Nation Council, you yourself as controller, and our legal counsel, our chief legal counsel, just those individuals to be in attendance. And so I make that motion, Speaker, for 30 minutes. Reserve my time. Thank you.
Reserve time of 2 minutes and 23 seconds. And colleagues, there is a motion on the floor for executive session for 30 minutes, and that is pertaining back to Rule 23. And a motion under this rule shall take precedence over any motion. So colleagues, we can put that here on the board, and then I will recognize a second. But it does read here, motion to go into executive session for 30 minutes. Is there a second? Second by Honorable Simpson. Point of order raised by Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton.
Thank you, Speaker. I know I can't make this amendment on this motion, but I'd like to ask if we could consider 1 hour, because we don't ever get done with executive session in 30 minutes. There's going to be a lot of questions, and I think realistically, probably 2 hours would be enough, but I think we can probably get these questions answered within the hour.
Thank you, Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton, and that discussion goes back to the motioning party for executive session. Honorable Bitch James.
Again, thank you very much, Speaker, members of the council. I will go ahead and honor that hour. I believe it's lunchtime as well. So I think we can make that accommodation. Thank you.
Seconding party, Honorable Simpson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, members of the 25th Council. I concur.
Thank you, Honorable Simpson. And colleagues, there is that motion here on the floor. All right, colleagues, we can put 2 minutes on the board. There is a motion to go into executive session. Colleagues, we have 25 seconds on the board, and delegates can move over to the Budget and Finance room for our executive session. I know we do have guests that are here, so they can enjoy lunch in here while we're doing our session at the Budget and Finance room. Honorable Herman Daniels, how do you vote? Honorable Daniel votes green. Honorable Jermaine Simonson, how do you vote? Honorable Simonson votes green. Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie votes green. And colleagues, the vote is of 20 in favor, 0 opposed, with Speaker not voting, and we will enter into executive session at 12:01 p.m. And we can put the timer clock, and we will be meeting in the Budget and Finance room.